And hello again, and here we are back in my drive. I'm just about to spray my bodywork with this stuff, Spraymax 2K lacquer at last. So the paintwork's been left alone for about 3.5 weeks to gas off, and hopefully that's long enough because today's the only day of the week but it won't be wet and cold, so I've got to take my chances. So I've just cleaned up the parts using some white spirits, and I've just wet down the drive, as you can see, just to keep any dust down. So now I've got to shake this can for 2 minutes, which I've now done, and then I've got to combine the hardener that's inside here with the paint that's in 2 separate compartments in the can. And to do that, there's a little button here in the base that I've got to push in. Once that's done, I've got to shake it up for another 2 minutes, and then we're good to go. So let's get started. And now I've done 2 coats on the tail section and the 2 side panels, and it went pretty well. I've now also done 1 coat on the tank, and I was about to do a 2nd coat when I noticed a problem. And that problem is right there. It's a little fly has landed in the wet lacquer and got stuck. Not ideal. So I can't touch it yet. I've got to wait until this tank is beyond touch dry, which will take about an hour or so. Then I'll get rid of it, smooth it down a little bit, and give it a 2nd coat. And so, as you can see, I've now given the tank a 2nd coat, having removed that errant fly that landed in the 1st coat. And so now I've got all the bodywork with 2 coats of lacquer. And the good news is, I think I've got enough paint left in the can to give the tank a 3rd coat, which is great news. Other good news is the sun's come out, and that's good news because the lacquer cures underneath UV light. And guess what? Sunshine contains lots of UV light, so that'll help the paint to cure. In fact, these side panels and the seat unit are actually touch dry. I can actually move them around, but I'll just leave it out here in the sunshine for another hour or 2, and then I'll take them in the garage, and tomorrow, when they're fully cured, I'll start the rather tedious job of cutting back this finish to get a really good shine on all the bodywork. But for now, I've got to give that tank its 3rd coat of lacquer, and hopefully no more flies come along and land in my 3rd coat. Well, it seems I spoke too soon, because guess what? Something else has fallen into the 2nd coat of lacquer, a bit of leaf I think, and that's the price you pay for spraying outside on a sunny day. Not much more I can do about that, other than let the lacquer harden off, get rid of that, rub it down, and give the tank its 3rd coat of Spraymax lacquer. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, nothing else falls in the lacquer as that dries. The good news is, in the sunshine, this Spraymax lacquer will be dry in about 10 or 15 minutes. So hopefully, in that time span, nothing else will fall into the paintwork. Well, I hope not anyway. Right, so here we have all the bodywork drying off in the sunshine, having done 2 coats on the side panels and the tailpiece and 3 coats on the tank. And I must admit, it does look quite good from the camera in the sunshine, but that's a bit deceptive because this paintwork, or the lacquer rather, is full of little imperfections. It's full of little dust mites, things that have fallen in the lacquer as I sprayed, and that's just something you have to put up with when you spray outside. Yes, I did get a little leaf and a bloody little fly, saw them, but no doubt there's other things I can see now as I look around it, little tiny bits of dust and God knows what else. The good news is though, having put 3 coats of lacquer on this tank, there should be enough depth of that lacquer so that when I cut it back using some very fine sandpaper, sort of 3000 grade tomorrow, I should be able to remove most of those imperfections. This paint job won't be as good as a professional could do. There's no way I could do that, but the good news is I've got no sags or drips anywhere on the paintwork, which is a great relief. So now I'm just going to leave it out in the sunshine. When it gets a bit darker, I'll put it in the garage, nice and safe, until tomorrow, and then we'll start the rather tedious business of flattening back all this lacquer and getting up to a decent shine, and hopefully removing most of these small imperfections I can see in the sunshine. And so here we have some very fine wet and dry sandpaper. This is 2500 grade, which is the finest I've got. So I'm just going to use it as is. I won't be using a sanding block because, well, it's such a small piece and it's full of compound curves, so I don't use a big block on this thing. It's a bit too aggressive. I'm much happier just using my fingers very lightly and plenty of soapy water. I've got some very liquid here, just a little bit of that, followed by lots and lots of water, like so. I'm going to be very gentle. I'm also going to keep away from the edges of the side panel here and around here. That's where it's very easy to cut through the lacquer and you end up making a mess of it and having to start again. So I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to be very gentle. It feels like it's hardly cutting anything at all, but it is. And now in a little while what we'll see is some sort of white liquid. The water turns white, and that's the lacquer coming off the surface of the side panel. So I'm just going to be very gentle now with this. It doesn't need much at all. So now then, I'm just going to keep well away from, as I say, the edges of the side panel. It's not such a problem on the tank, of course, because that's got no real sharp edges, but on this thing you've got edges all the way around, which I'm going to keep well away from. And what I'm going to try and do is remove any of those little spots of dust that landed in the lacquer, and hopefully this will do it. So I'm removing a tiny amount of lacquer from the surface, but not too much. I don't want to break through. This side panel and the tail section's only got 2 coats of lacquer, which looks thick. It's not that thick, so yeah, I don't want to go too far. Right, so this is how the side panel looks after it's been rubbed down with 2500 grade wet and dry sandpaper. It doesn't look too good, does it? It's all dull. It's still a bit wet here. It's all dull and doesn't look too impressive. But the good news is it's now pretty damn smooth. I've got rid of all that mottled finish in the lacquer, most of it anyway. I could keep going and get it absolutely perfect, but there are still a few spots where you can see that mottling. But I'm not going to do that because I'm fearful of rubbing through the whole thickness of the lacquer and breaking through to the colour coat, which we don't want. So I'm pretty happy with that so far. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tack it with, not tack it, but use the rubbing compound, because this will start to bring back the shine in the lacquer, because right now it's as dull as dishwater, isn't it? So this is when it gets very tedious, very slow process. As I say, the pros use your machines for this, DA sanders, dual action sanders on a slow speed, and they can do a whole car probably in an hour, whereas it'll take me that long to probably to do 1 or 2 side panels. But there you go. So I'll come back in a little while, or a long while, when I finish polishing this thing up with the rubbing compound, followed by the cutting polish. Phew, well, I've just about finished rubbing down this side panel with the rubbing compound and the cutting polish. It's hard work, but we're almost there now. looks a lot better. I'm not sure if you can tell from the camera, but it is a lot smoother, no more lumps and bumps, and the finish is not so orangey peel anymore. I've still got lots of small, minute little scratches in the paintwork left there by obviously the wet and dry. You know, it's 2,500 grade, so I need to spend more time with the rubbing compound and the cutting polish to remove all that before I move on to giving it a final polish. So yeah, it is hard work, it does take a long time, and unless you've got all the gear, you can't be rushed. Just got to take your time, and eventually you'll get a decent result. And now it's getting late, but I've pretty much finished working on the tank in terms of rubbing down the lacquer to get a decent smooth finish before I use the rubbing compound on this tank, followed by the cutting polish to try and get a shine back to the lacquer. So let's just use this hairdryer I've got here just to speed things up a bit, and we'll see. Okay, so yeah, I'm pretty much finished now, and what I'm aiming for is a nice smooth matte finish everywhere with none of that orangey peel finish. There will still be some around the edges of the tank because I'm keeping well away from these edges, because it's so easy to burn through the lacquer and even the colour coat, and then you've ruined the tank and you've got to start again. So yeah, these edges will still be a little bit orangey peely, but that's okay. That's the price you pay for being safe. Better safe than sorry. So now that I'm pretty happy with the finish on this tank, I'm going to use the rubbing compound on it, and that's a huge amount of work, doing it all by hand. It's going to take me hours, no doubt, and now it's getting quite late. It's about 6:30 in the evening, so I'll stop for today, but tomorrow we'll carry on and attack this tank with rubbing compound, followed by the cutting polish, followed by the real polish, and hopefully at the end of it all, at the end of all that hard work, we should have a nice smooth tank that's nice and shiny and should last a long time, because of course I've used this Spraymax 2K lacquer on the paint, which is resistant to petrol and so on, solvents, so it should last a good long while, but we'll see. Right, so we'll carry on then tomorrow with the rubbing compound and the cutting paste, and we'll see how we get on. Phew, well, that's a lot of hard work. I've spent about an hour or so cutting back the lacquer with the rubbing compound on the tank and trying to bring back the shine. Still far from finished, but we are getting there. So next then, I've got to use this stuff, the cutting polish, on the tank and try and get a bit more of the shine back. One thing I have noticed though is that as I'm bringing back the shine and having cut back the lacquer, I am now seeing a few faults in the paintwork. I've got a slight dent there, not sure what it is, a little dent, a little mark there, which I couldn't see when, you know, it looked like it was straight on the tank. You don't notice it, but now I've flattened it all down, you do notice it, but there you go. And I think that's because I didn't spend enough time with the preparation, the undercoat, you know, the filler and so on, a few weeks ago when I first started working on the tank. And partly that's because I was rushed for time, but also because I was working out here on my drive, and every 5 minutes a bloody rain would come, a cloud would come over and rain, so I got to stop and start. So it was very difficult at the time to get this thing worked on. I really should have done it perhaps in the middle of summer where I had nice warm long days, but there you go. It's not bad though, it's not bad. So next then, when I finished using the cutting polish on the tank, I'm going to refit the tank badges, for which I've got a new bit of clever tape to do that, some double-sided tape from 3M. I'm also going to fit a brand new filler cap that I bought for the tank. So that's what's next. Right, I think that's it. So now we've got a brand new filler cap. Brilliant. By the way, I've just been told that even though this is a different key from the one on the bike, there's no tumbler inside this lock, so pretty much any key can open the filler cap, which is handy to know. Right, so next then, I'm going to fit the badges. And so to fit the tank badges, I've got to use some kind of double-sided tape. So I've bought some very high performance tape from 3M, which I've already used to stick on the new side panel badges on the side panels, and it worked quite well. So let's go back in the garage and I'll show you how it works. And so here are the tank badges, and here we have the double-sided tape I'm going to use to stick them to the tank. It's made by 3M and it's called VHB. It's a very high performance double-sided tape. Now the tape comes in various widths. I'm a bit of a cheapskate, so I got the narrowest one, the 10mm, which isn't quite wide enough, but that's okay, because what I can do, if I turn it over, is I can put 2 strips of the tape on here and then put it on the bike. So what we've got to do now is very carefully measure out roughly how much we want, something like that, cut it off, doesn't matter if it's a bit too long, I suppose, and then just stick it on without trying to get it too, so I put it quite low down, like so. Like that. So that's a bit long, but that's no problem. I can just cut it off, like so. Put it back slightly, cut it back, and there you go. So that's the first one done. And now I'm going to do the second one, same kind of thing. And when I've done it, then all I've got to do is work out where it's going to go on the tank. Peel back this red vinyl cover here. Let's go back a little bit here, and then stick it on the tank. Now, originally, of course, these badges were screwed on to the tank, but they are renowned for being a rust spot, and the screws rust up and you can't get them out. So folks, just go for this sort of method, just like the owner. Before I had it, he stuck these on with something else. So the problem is, if I just cut that off there we go. So we'll just push that down there nice and tight. I've done that wrong, I've got a little lip there. Let's see if I can remove that. Just move it slightly. There we go. Luckily you can just pull it off ever so slightly and then move it. That's better. I don't want it sticking up over the logo, so you don't want to see it when it's on the tank. So there you go, there's 2 strips. So now I've got to do this one. And so, as I was saying, these badges were originally screwed onto the tank with 2 small screws here and here. So when I stick it on the tank, you're going to see these holes which will look a bit odd. So what I might do is I might take some small countersunk bolts and cut off the thread and stick them into these holes, so it appears that it's being held on with those countersunk bolts, but it won't be, it'll just be stuck on. So that's an idea. Right, so that's the first one on. Hopefully it's level-ish. So now I've got to try and measure up the same space on the other side, and we'll stick on the other Kawasaki badge. And so to finish off today's work, I was going to fit all the bodywork to the bike along with my new seat, and here it is. So I bolted on the hinges, put the pins in for the frame, only to find it won't hinge beyond that point, and that's because for some reason the hinges have this tab here sticking out, serves no purpose, and I'm sure the original bike didn't have that. So I have to remove them from the bike, saw off this bit of the hinge, repaint it black, refit it to the bike, and then hopefully the seat will fit just fine. I mean, it's never easy, God knows what they're supposed to be, but they serve no purpose. And now here we are, it's the next day, and I've modified and painted those seat hinges and got the seat fitted on the bike. And so, as you can see in my garage here, there's not much room to work. However, if you'd watched my last video about respoking wheels, you'll know that I've now rebuilt the wheels for the Z650 with brand new spokes and new aluminium rims. And so today I'm going to take those wheels over to my local tyre shop and hopefully get some new tyres and inner tubes on those wheels in the next few days. But because these wheels are quite old-fashioned now, with a 19-inch front wheel and an 18-inch rear wheel, they don't tend to stock those tyre sizes in my local tyre shop. So I've got to wait a few days for those tyres to turn up, get them fitted, and then we can get them on the bike. After that, the real work starts for me, which is the electrics, which I'm not looking forward to, but there you go. And I'm going to refit the original loom, but I'm going to tidy it up a little bit, fix a few problems, and modify it where necessary, because of course I have made some changes to the bike. But all that will be in the next episode, so that's it for now. So thanks for watching, and cheers.